The U.S. National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, or NHTSA, has just announced some pretty huge and unprecedented regulatory changes for autonomous vehicle safety standards. We're going to dig into what it all means, but the headline has got to be NHTSA reworking its regulations to account for autonomous vehicles that don't have manual controls, such as pedals and steering wheels. Kate was originally going to cover this one, but her video, well, it was just 10 minutes of this. So it falls to me to give you a more nuanced perspective on what all this means. But first, this is the part of the video where I remind you to like, comment, subscribe, and stab that notification button like you're Brutus and it's Julius Caesar. And if you want to help us keep making cleaner, greener, safer, and smarter content while staying independent, I'll tell you how at the end. Back to the video, and a little disclaimer that Nikki wanted me to put in. See, I know this video is about the US, and a lot of our viewers aren't in the US. But just like we gave you Coca-Cola, McMansions, Marshmallow Fluff, and OxyContin, what happens in the US auto industry tends to have a fairly big impact on the wider world. So if something happens here that influences what car companies are legally allowed to do, it tends to spread, better than the aforementioned sugar in fluff form. To understand these new rules, we've got to start with the agency that makes them. The NHTSA, generally just said as NHTSA, is part of the US Department of Transportation and is responsible for developing and enforcing the federal motor vehicle safety standards, licensing automakers and importers, setting NCAP crash testing protocols, and investigating automotive safety issues, to name only some of its remit. In the United States, if a vehicle travels on roads, its safety is governed by NHTSA. Though once it crashes, then it's in the domain of the NTSB, unless that crash ends up being caused by a systemic problem, in which case it may come back to NHTSA. Look, I'm not going to pretend that the US regulatory system is always clear or logical in design. These are rules, by the way, not laws, because they're made by a regulatory body rather than a legislative one. Laws apply to everyone equally, while regulations only apply to those who deal directly with a regulatory agency, in this case, automakers. Regulations often come into effect due to a law, such as the one which created NHTSA, but it's worth noting that a regulatory rule can carry much the same force as a law, even though it comes about through a different path. I think of it like the difference between lightning from the sky versus lightning from a large Van de Graaff generator, because I'm a dork. So what does this rule change do? To put it simply, it updates existing crash protection standards to allow for vehicles without a quote-unquote driver. That doesn't sound like a big deal at first blush, but it's actually huge. NHTSA's press release reads, quote, "Before today's rule, occupant protection standards were written for common, traditional vehicle features, including steering wheels and other manual controls. The rule updates the standard to clarify what is required of manufacturers when applying the standards to ADS-equipped vehicles without traditional manual controls." End quote. ADS there stands for Autonomous Driving Systems, by the way, not ads as in adverts. Although, you can bet those will be common features in autonomous vehicles too, because this is the bad place. So why a whole video about a seemingly small change in wording from an important but often overlooked governmental agency? Simple. By creating new safety standards for autonomous vehicles without manual controls, the agency that regulates automotive safety in the US is giving its blessing to autonomous vehicles not having manual controls. Look, if the NHL announced a new rule saying that smashing a lemon meringue pie in the face of an opposing goalie meant 2 minutes in the sin bin, the takeaway would be, wait, you can now smash a pie in the goalie's face during a Major League Hockey game? This is the same sort of thing. For our European viewers, by the way, I mean hockey as in ice hockey, kinda like football but played on ice by adults with knives on their feet, who spend most of their time chasing after a puck while hitting each other with big sticks. This is not to be confused with field hockey, where teams, often school-age girls, chase a ball on a field but also spend most of their time hitting each other with sticks, exacting revenge for some slight or another. Ice hockey and field hockey aren't that different, are they? Aside from the knives on feet thing. So, with Kate's aghast screams still ringing in my head, let's examine what this means. Firstly, it removes a huge hurdle from GM's Cruise and Alphabet's Waymo, both of which have vehicles in development that lack manual controls. It also opens up the door to Tesla producing a car without controls, something Elon Musk said last year he was interested in seeing Tesla do, but the company doesn't currently have such a vehicle in development as far as we know. Reuters reports that GM petitioned NHTSA to implement these rule changes, and that is honestly unsurprising. GM has been clear that getting its Cruise Origin pod on the road carrying paying passengers is an important part of its financial roadmap for the next few years. Am I saying that you're going to be able to run out and buy an autonomous car of your own without any manual controls anytime soon? No. But in many major cities, this rule change makes it far more likely that you'll be able to catch a ride in or receive a delivery from a purpose-built driverless cab or pod much sooner than you might think. Geofenced Cruise and Waymo autonomous ride-sharing vehicles are already carrying passengers in many places using modified passenger EVs. And in San Francisco, you can already ride in a Cruise vehicle without a human driver. Leaving manual controls out of autonomous passenger vehicles can save on construction costs, simplify vehicle safety, and improve rideshare profit margins by carrying more passengers and not having to pay a driver. But where I think we're going to see the biggest impact of these rule changes in the short run is in autonomous cargo transportation. If your vehicle doesn't have any humans on board, you don't need to include a whole host of safety systems designed to keep a human safe and alive. Remove the driver from a cargo vehicle, and you not only don't need pedals or a steering wheel with its collapsible column, you also don't need any airbags or a reinforced safety cell. The removal of the latter alone could be a huge cost savings. Not to mention that you don't need traditional doors or a seat with a seatbelt or cabin HVAC systems, and the list goes on. Other than wheels, energy storage, propulsion, and needing to operate on existing roads, an autonomous cargo vehicle doesn't have to bear any real resemblance to what we think of as a car or truck today. You may think all of this is super awesome, or you may think it's terrible, or somewhere in between. But here's the thing. It doesn't really matter what you or I think. This is happening. Let's take a trip back in time. The year is 1945, and in the city of New York, business has ground to a halt due to a worker strike that would eventually cost the city about $100 million in lost revenue. What workforce had the power to stymie one of the largest economic engines remaining on the planet? Elevator operators. Now, it's worth noting that autonomous elevators had existed for literally decades by that point, but many people just weren't comfortable trusting their safety to a machine instead of a person. And that's even though elevator-related injuries and fatalities due to operator error were very much a thing. People preferred to trust a flawed human they could see and relate to over a soulless automaton they couldn't. Sound familiar? But money makes the world go round, and in the months and years after the strike, the elevator operator disappeared in favor of the safer and far cheaper to operate automated models, which also can't go on strike. As for a skeptical public, People grew so used to automated elevators after a few rides that today the idea of riding in an elevator fully under the control of a human operator sounds absurd. Even the few operator-manned elevators remaining in use today don't typically give full control to the operator the way they did in the days when the operator was in charge of timing the arrival at a floor and manually triggering the doors to open and close. Part of being a grown-up and living in a society is recognizing when the things we love are bad for us and/or the people around us. Reality is that humans are objectively not great at piloting heavy, fast, powerful machines in close proximity with other people doing the same thing. Autonomous vehicles could potentially make us all safer and healthier. But that's not why I think they're an inevitability. We, as a species and society, generally suck at doing things in the interest of the public good. I didn't bring up the New York elevator operator strike because elevators got safer when they became automated, although they did. I brought it up because there are clear economic incentives for companies such as ride-sharing, cargo, and delivery firms to move to purpose-built autonomous vehicles. That's why autonomous vehicles are only going to become a larger and larger part of our transportation future. Any safety gains are purely incidental to gains in profit. We're still a good ways away from most people being able to give up pedals and steering wheels for their primary vehicle, but just like internal combustion engines are nearing the limits of their evolution, so too are humans perhaps reaching the end of how much we can improve as drivers, while autonomous driving systems, much like EV drivetrains, are just getting started. NHTSA's regulatory changes reflect that reality, and yes, are intended to help make it happen. If at this point you are thinking, wait, what about all the people who could find themselves unemployed as driving jobs are taken over by automation? I congratulate you on both knowing history and having empathy. Driving a truck is, after all, the most common job in more than half of all US states. And while at the moment fully autonomous driving systems are largely geofenced within major cities, that's likely to change as technology improves. However, we live in an economic system incompatible with empathy in the face of growing shareholder value, and while these systems are going to be disruptive to society, that is highly unlikely to prevent or even slow their deployment. If you're thinking, my Winter, you're awfully cynical, well, yeah. Personally, I doubt driving will disappear entirely over the next century. But just as riding a horse has gone from a transportation necessity for many to a recreational activity mostly reserved for the well-to-do, some of us watching this video may live to see a time when driving oneself is little more than a hobby practiced by an eccentric few, at least in wealthy nations. If that comes about, this NHTSA rule change will surely be seen as a major milestone along the road. That's it for today. If you liked the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to leave your thoughts below or in our free-to-join Discord chat room. There's a link in the video description. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to this channel and our other channel, Transfer Evolved Take 2, and give the bell an energetic stab to make sure you're told when our next video goes live. Thanks on behalf of the entire T crew go out to the folk on my right for being our $15 to $49 a month supporters. Special thanks to our $50 a month supporters, Chris Maxwell, Bennett Elder, Brian Newton, Dave Kitchen, Michael Goad, Ricky Leung, Andrew Martin, Guido Drahota, Brophy Wolf, Tesla Nagong, Gordon C., Stephen O'Donohue, Kyle Hodson, Anthony Coates, Regine Fellows, Rory Litwin, Anonymous Freak, Jim Burness, Zachary Courtney, Chris Ascenta, and Denny Hyde. And our deepest gratitude to $100 a month supporters, Marcel Ward, Reggie Watts, Joe Bresney, JP Fagerback, Will Graylin, Matthew Drobnak, John Lyons, Christopher Lee Jones, Andrew Glenn, Paul Conway, Ellery Hensley, and Ian. Feeling left out? You can join Patreon at the link below, hit the join button to support us right here on YouTube, or show us your support through Bitcoin, Ko-fi, or our cool swag store. There are links below. Thanks for joining me, and as always, keep evolving!